I've been dwelling on the idea of writing about this for a while. I guess it just hadn't gotten to the point where it was concerning enough to write about. But now I'd say it's about there. All was good, relatively speaking, until that kid started coming round. At first, he was just a nuisance, and he didn't bother me that much. But he bothered the hell out of my mum for some reason. From the first time he came round, she would react aggressively. I felt a bit sorry for him myself. He probably had mental issues, and seemingly so does my mum, judging by her reactions to him. He had a bit of a bizarre habit of coming around to the house and standing at the front gate until someone came out. Once he got someone to come out, he would simply say, "Someone is hungry." The first time he did it, both my mother and I went out, thinking something might be wrong. Then he said those 3 words, and I was about to ask what he meant. That was when my mum exploded. She began yelling at the kid, calling him a filthy vagrant, a liar, and even threatening to kill him right there and then. I was in such shock at her sudden eruption that it took me a few moments to gather my wits and try to de-escalate the situation. I was a bit worried at the idea of neighbours looking out and seeing my mum yelling at some random kid about killing him. Eventually, with a lot of effort, I managed to get her away from the gate and into the house. The kid just stood there silently while I practically dragged her inside. I then went outside to ask the kid what was wrong, and he was gone. After going back inside the house, I asked my mum what the hell just happened. She was livid and looked at me, wild-eyed and breathless.
"That child is a horrible little monster. He is the devil, and he is so evil he shouldn't be allowed to live,"
she yelled at me. I was alarmed. "Mum, you don't even know him. I've never seen him before, have you? How do you know him?"
"He is filth and he needs to go,"
was her only response. I couldn't get a better answer out of her. For some reason, she was adamant that he was an absolutely vile creature that was so evil he didn't deserve to live, and she would rant endlessly about it if I asked. So I eventually just gave up. The problem was, the kid came around almost daily after that. My mum would totally lose her crap when he did, and it got harder and harder to get the situation under control. I got to the point where I was going to call the police and have them find out where this kid came from, and why he kept coming here. There were a few times where I was able to get out there before my mum noticed he was there, and I managed to get to him before she did. He was a small, pale-skinned kid, and he always wore the same grey shirt and white pants, and had a small blue kid's bicycle. I tried to speak to him a few times, but he wouldn't answer any questions, and would only say, "Someone is hungry." There were times where I'd be at school and I would get called out of class to the main office where I'd have a phone call from my mum, screaming that he was there and wouldn't leave. It was really distressing. I began to get really worried about Mum and wondered if she did have some sort of mental issue that was somehow triggered by that kid. I had decided one day, after another frantic phone call at school, that I would phone the police after I got home and ask them what I should do about it. After I got home that day, I found Mum sitting outside on one of the lawn chairs. When she saw me, she smiled and waved me over. I was really apprehensive as she hadn't been like this for ages now.
"Before you say anything, our problem is solved,"
she said, beaming. Solved? How? I asked, seriously concerned about the answer.
"Well, I came out here and gave him a real piece of my mind. It was such an earful that he just left and he hasn't come back. I'm so happy."
"That's great, but you've yelled at him before, and I've tried to tell him to go away too, and it didn't work. So why did he listen to you this time?" I asked carefully. You can probably imagine why I was so on edge. It was a really jarring transition, going from her yelling that she was going to kill him to the kid suddenly going away and everything being fine. I was just so glad that she was back to normal. She was right about the kid not coming back. I didn't see him again. A few days down the line, I had to do some weekend work in the garden. I went to fetch some tools in the shed, and to my horror and dismay, there in the back of the tool shed was a little blue bicycle. I dropped the lock and keys I was holding and just stared at it, my mouth hanging open. Mum had obviously forgotten she had asked me to do the garden work, and knew I would have to go into the shed for tools. The only thing I could think of doing was locking up the shed again, exactly as it was. After that, I put the keys back, exactly as they had been. A short while later, Mum came home, and while she was in the kitchen unpacking stuff she had bought as I helped her, she glanced out of the back door and seemed to remember.
"Oh, don't worry about doing the garden this weekend. Oh, don't worry about doing the garden this weekend. They said the weather is going to be scorching, and I don't want you to have to work in that heat."
I just nodded dumbly and said nothing. She had never done that before. Never. Later that night, at dinner, my mind was raging while we ate, wondering what I was going to do. I knew I had to call the police. I almost dropped my spoon when I looked up and saw Mum staring at me with a wide smile, watching me intently.
"Someone is hungry," she said.
I stared right back at her until eventually she broke her gaze and got up and started clearing away the dishes. She took my plate away as well, and I didn't even argue that I wasn't done. After hearing her say that, for some reason my appetite just evaporated. She was seriously unhinged. Something was mentally wrong with her, and I didn't know what. She must have done something terrible and was trying to act normal to cover it up. It wasn't working. The next day, I decided it was high time I get this situation sorted out. If she had done something to that boy, but I could prove that she was mentally unhinged, I was sure she would at least not get a death sentence or jail time. She would go to a mental hospital, and I could at least still see her. I couldn't believe I had to think about these things, but here I was. I decided to try to make everything as relaxed as possible so I could speak to her that night and convince her that we should both go to the police, and she should confess to anything she may have done wrong. My entire world froze in a silent, screaming horror when I opened the freezer to get something out for dinner. And there, enclosed in a clear plastic bag, was the severed head of a small boy, looking up at me with an open-mouthed expression of terror on its face. The longer I stared, the worse it became. I saw more bags full of chunks of bloody meat frozen solid, and even a severed foot in another bag in the corner. Everything raced through my mind all at once. The boy, Mum losing her mind whenever she saw him, her threatening to kill him. The most horrifying of all was the fact that for the past 3 days in a row, Mum had made stew every night for dinner. I hadn't questioned it because I thought she was just getting over her stress and I just didn't want to upset her, so I ate. I started to scream now, not caring if the neighbours heard. I just screamed. I don't know what else to do at this point. I've run out of answers for when people ask where Mum is. Another thing I've run out of is freezer space, even after filling the one in the spare room. People at school and in the neighbourhood are getting suspicious of me. I can tell. I couldn't really be bothered. All I can think of is that someone is hungry. Someone out there is very, very hungry. Hey guys, and thank you once again for listening to the latest in my Creepypasta series. Now this is another upload by Thousand Thorns on Reddit, so go check him out in the description. He does some incredible stuff, and honestly every story has a great twist at the end, just like this one. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I did it some justice in the reading. So I had my week off. My girlfriend gave birth to a beautiful little girl, and this week's been incredible. Becoming a dad, a first-time parent myself, and learning the things that I've learned and spending time with a little life that I've created is so fulfilling. And yeah, I'm still elated by it. So these will now carry on as normal. They may be a little bit delayed, they may be a little bit early. It just depends how hectic my life is now. So hopefully everything stays on schedule. I hope it does. I'm just a really, really happy person right now. So I'll quit rambling now. Thousand Thorns, go check it out in the description. If you want to submit anything, you can submit that via our Discord, which will be in the description, or you can talk to me on there. You can also catch some of the bloopers from the podcast on the Facebook page, so they'll be going on there specifically from now on. I don't know if that'll change depending on time and effort, but there'll definitely be bloopers made somewhere, but for now they'll be on Facebook. So anyway, again, enough of me rambling. Thank you for listening, and take care.